And we are live with another edition of the All Gas No Breaks Sports Show. I am one of your co-hosts, Nicholas Pavona, joined alongside, as always, by my co-host, Andrew Johnson. And Johnson and the rest of our folks here, we have crowned an NBA champion this year in the year 2025. It took 7 games for us to get to this final portion of the season to crowning that NBA champion. The first time in almost a decade we had a Game 7 in the NBA Finals, but last night we did have a champion crown, and congratulations to the Oklahoma City Thunder on getting the job done. It was a very hard-fought series between them and the Indiana Pacers, but the Thunder get the job done. But Johnson, we'll talk about this in just a little bit, I'm sure. It does come at a very highly cost for the Indiana Pacers at the end of the day that more than likely is going to really cost them this upcoming 2025-2026 season.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if they're even somewhat competitive next year. This is the 7th unique champion in 7 seasons. So the last time we had a back-to-back champion were the Golden State Warriors during that two-peat with Kevin Durant back in 2017 and 2018.
Yeah, and it took a weird way to how we got to this portion, because obviously we saw OKC took care of business in the Western Conference Finals against Minnesota. Unfortunately for us, the Indiana Pacers got the job done against the New York Knicks, and it led to this NBA final between OKC and Indiana. And going into it, a lot of the expectation was, all right, OKC is more than likely going to handle Indiana more. You would have to think, and they're going to get the job done and finally get that NBA championship. Well, it looked that way starting in Game 1. It looked like OKC was going to be on their way to a 1-0 lead in this series. And then Johnson, something that we've seen so many times in this postseason, Indiana just finding a way to come back and win a game at the very tail end. A last-second shot by Tyrese Halliburton gave them a 1-point victory over OKC after they were down 15 points with under 5 minutes left in that game. They go on to steal Game 1, 111-110. So you're thinking, okay, well, they've done it again. Indiana stole a game on the road. Can they do it again in Game number 2? Game number 2 was more about what we've kind of seen from this OKC team, their defense leading to offensive points. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander doing what he's done best, and that just dominated when needed the most. Thunder go on to win Game 2, 123-107. In Game number 3, it would go into Indiana, and that's where the Pacers would have a very strong effort, and especially in that fourth quarter. They outscored the Thunder in the fourth quarter by 14 points en route to a 116-107 win to take a 2-1 series lead. And going into that fourth game, Johnson, and it looked like they were about to be up 3-1 in that series. The Pacers had a fourth quarter lead in that game, but their offense really struggled down the stretch of that contest. And that's really what cost them not only this game, but more than likely cost them this series as well, as a 14-point overscore from OKC. They outscore them 31-17 in that fourth quarter. They go on to win 111-104 and tie the series and more than likely save their season at the end of the day. Game number 5, we saw a brilliant performance from Jalen Williams, 40-point game in game number 5 to give OKC a huge 120-109 victory. That gave them the 3-2 series advantage, gave them a chance to win the series, but lost in that as well was Tyrese Halliburton dealing with a calf injury that really plagued them for, at first it was supposed to be an injury that was talked about going into Game 1, Game 2, where he said, I have a little bit of a lower leg injury, not a huge issue, I'm going to play, and then turned into this calf issue after Game number 5. And in a few moments, we'll tell you how that really impacted what happened the rest of the series. In Game number 6, Thunder looking to close it out and win their first ever NBA championship. They would not get the job done. Indiana just pretty much dominated this game from start to finish over the Thunder in a way that we haven't seen the Thunder lose all season realistically. Pacers win Game 6, 108-91, forcing the Game 7 that just happened last night as of this recording. And it looked like off the jump, it was going to be a good start for Indiana. Tyrese Halliburton was hitting some big shots, had 3 3-pointers in a matter of, I think, 5 minutes it was. And then that injury I mentioned a few moments ago that happened in Game number 5 came back to haunt the Indiana Pacers in this Game 7. Halliburton ruptures his Achilles that was similar to what happened with Jason Tatum earlier on in the second round of the Eastern Conference playoffs. He goes down with the injury pretty much derails any momentum Indiana had at that point. The Thunder would start to make a little bit of a rally. Indiana, despite the injury, did have the halftime lead, but a big third quarter from the Thunder really got things going for them. Their defense was on point. They kept forcing turnovers. I think they had 8 turnovers at one point in that third quarter. Might be a little bit more than that number. They would then you translate that to big offensive points. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander had another unbelievable game. 29 points, 12 assists, only 1 turnover in this game. And not having Tyrese Halliburton really haunted Indiana the rest of the way. TJ McConnell and Pascal Siakam did everything they possibly could to try to keep the Pacers in this game, but it just was not enough. OKC goes on to win Game 7, 103-91, capturing their first ever NBA championship. Of course, they won a championship when they were the Seattle Supersonics, but it's their first title in the OKC era. And for Indiana, as we mentioned at the beginning of this broadcast, a very hard-fought series, almost getting their first NBA championship. But because of them not able to win that championship, Johnson, they now lose their star player for what more than likely will be the rest of the next season as well.
Yeah. The best case scenario, he'll be out for about 8 months post surgery. So if he gets surgery, let's say next week, right? Let's say he gets it July 1st. He's out until at least beginning of March.
Yeah.
And do you even bring him back at that point? Because by beginning of March, you maybe have 25 games left in the regular season. And you know what you are as a team at that point. Because it's not like he comes back and it's like, oh, yeah, he's instantly going to put up 20 and 10. No, he's going to come off the bench and maybe he'll play 20 minutes a game. So for him to even be rushed back at that point, unless the Pacers are gunning for the number 1 overall seed, which anything is possible, obviously, but it's more than likely that's not going to be their position. You're better off just sitting him the entire year.
I think what's eerie similar to what happened to Halliburton, and you might agree with me on this, you might not. It felt somewhat similar to what happened to Kevin Durant back when they played the Raptors.
So I'm gonna say no because Kevin Durant and the Warriors were heavy favorites to win that series.
Well, no, meaning that the injury aspect of what happened to him, where he got hurt in the series, was told he probably shouldn't play. He played anyway, and then eventually got hurt with the ruptured Achilles as well.
I mean, I would like to talk about, and this is one of my theories on why we are seeing so many ruptured Achilles. I think it's because of not because the players are playing too much during the regular season. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say it's more so load management during the regular season, and now all of a sudden you're in the playoffs and they can't take games off. So I don't think their bodies are used to playing so many more extra games. Does that make sense? Like if you play the entire time, right? Like your body has it's like a muscle, right? Like your calf muscles, obviously, they get accustomed to certain workouts. So if they're accustomed to like, okay, I could do this every day at X amount of intensity for this long, not taking any rest days, or these are my rest days, and that's fine. Now all of a sudden you've been doing that for let's say 2 or 3 years at this point, which a lot of these guys are, like Jason Tatum, or it's Dame Lillard, or it's Tyrese Halliburton in this situation, where all these guys load manage during the regular season. So, for example, Tyrese, he played 73 games this year. That's great. He played 69 the year before that. He played 56 the year before that. So, I want to say it's because all of a sudden, like, they're not playing 80 games and then they're not playing 24 on top of this. I don't know. They're not playing the extended minutes during the regular season. Like, they're playing too many games, or whether they're too close together. And, Tibbs is obviously, I don't want to call him psychotic in the sense that he would run his players into the ground, but he ran his team more of a higher minutes for the stars than any other franchise this year. And the Knicks had one of the healthiest rosters. Is it the medical staff that has something to do with it? Absolutely. But I think a lot of it comes down to it's how much the body is willing to adapt in a short period of time. And if your body isn't used to playing these, 100 plus games, season in, season out, let's say like you're LeBron James, where, back in the day when he would play 80 games in a season and then he would go play 10, 15 games at the end of a year and he'd play 40 minutes a night. I just don't think their bodies are accustomed to, playing these high extended minutes and then all of a sudden, not doing that during the regular season. Or if you are going to play a game of 45 minutes, okay, you're off the next game. Like, no, you're playing again. It's the playoffs. Like, you don't have that option. So I'd have to take a look at how many minutes Tyrese was averaging during the finals. But that's, what I want to believe. I don't know if you have anything to add on that.
I think it was just more of how after I think it was either game one or game two, they asked him about the initial injury that he had, and he said, "It's the finals. I have to play. Like I'm going to go out there and play no matter what." And the only reason I brought up the Durant, similarity is because exactly what happened with Durant. Durant got injured early on in that finals too, and he said, "It's the finals. I have to play." Because remember, that was after they had won already, so he already had a championship under his belt, and obviously it changed the impact of what happened in that
Hey,
series as
he had
well,
two already.
with Toronto winning their first ever championship. Not saying Indiana would have gone on to win game seven if Halliburton stayed in, but losing him absolutely played a factor into last night's game because you lose it. He had a monster start to the game. If he continued that the rest of the way, who knows? Indiana
Yeah, I
might
mean, I
be
don't think he's
standing
not
here
going
as
to
the NBA
continue that the
champion at the
rest
end
of
of
the
the day.
game. I mean, we say this all the time. Like, yeah, Nembhard had Neesmith had the one game where he shot 8 of 9 from 3. That was not happening last night. Let's just kind of dispel that fiction right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Halliburton would have kept that shooting performance up the way he was going, but because it's not going to happen the entirety of the game. I just think, having him at least in the game, who knows how much of an impact it could have on Indiana, at least keeping it close, or maybe just winning the game entirely.
Yeah, I would agree with you with that, and I think it's more so where do these teams go now next year? Because obviously the Thunder can keep this core intact. They
Yeah, I
have
mean, we know where the
11
Thunder can
players.
go from
So
here.
this is a stat including two-way players, but including two-way players, so guys on two-way contracts that can play both in the G League and for the main roster, obviously, 11 players that are either rookies, first or second year players. So I guess that's my first and second because technically they have a year of experience. So I guess it's rookies, sophomores, and then third year players. So third year players like Chet, and then you have rookies, and it's just crazy that 11 out of 17 players, including the two way guys, again including the two way guys, are rookies, sophomores, or third year players. So the sky's clearly the limit, and the only limit they're going to have on this is going to be the luxury tax. And if guys like Chet Holmgren and Jalen Williams end up getting a super max deal or something of that nature, because that second apron is a killer. So they will go as
Well,
far as the second apron will take them.
Well, if you look at the odds for champions for next season, the Thunder are overwhelming favorite going into next year. They're plus 220 odds. I think that's one of the lower odds we've seen in recent memory in terms of trying to repeat or just even try to win a championship in general. Then they're followed by Cleveland at plus 700, the Knicks at 750, the Rockets now plus 850 after the Kevin Durant trade. And then you have a bunch of teams at 14 to 1 odds. The Pacers, but that could be lowered after the Halliburton trade. Excuse me, not trade, injury. The Timberwolves at 14 to 1, the Celtics at 14 to 1, and the Lakers are at 14 to 1. So for Indiana, it's really tough to say where you go from here because
I think they're done for next year. I think
because
I'll be real with you. I think that we may have seen the best of Tyrese Halliburton. When you take a look at players that there's a list of players that have torn their Achilles and have come back either of equal or let's say greater value because coming back better after the Achilles tear is an oxymoron. It doesn't happen. Do you want to know the list of players that were at least all-star level when they came back after the Achilles tear?
yeah, go ahead.
Dominique Wilkins, who is a freak of nature athlete, and Kevin Durant. That's where the list stops. There's not a single player outside those two mentioned in the history of the NBA that have come back at least equal to their previous form. And even after that point, they take a lot of games off the load manage because of the injury. Kevin Durant, a guy, an Iron Man that used to play 70, 80 games a year, multiple seasons after that Achilles tear, 50 games played, 40 games played, 60 games played. He's gotten better as of late, but that's 5-6 years after the tear. Those
Right.
first couple of years after the tear, he was very cautious. And the only reason why a guy like Kevin Durant was as successful after the Achilles tears, he completely changed his game. And that's because he's one of the greatest jump shooters in NBA history, and he could do that. He wasn't the Kevin Durant that was driving to the basket, dunking the ball, going into the paint, getting foul calls. He really became, I don't want to say a spot up shooter, but he became a long distance shooter. And Dominique Wilkins is a freak athlete, so that's the only really explanation I have for him. But all these other guys, they really never recover from an Achilles tear. It's really a killer. You have everyone in history, even guys like Kobe Bryant. They never came back equal to it afterwards. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
they were never the same. And I think if you look at the Pacers, like contract wise, like I think the good thing for them is that their roster's under contract for the majority of it. I think the only other thing outside of it is they have a couple players on a team option, so they have the option to keep those guys or not. But they have everyone locked under contract for now. So it really comes down to, do they make any moves in the offseason in terms of trading? Because they could maybe look to try to upgrade at certain positions and at least, try to stay in the Eastern Conference, at least make the playoffs. If they make a trade, try to replace Halliburton at least for the year. And I think they're still on paper a playoff
Oh, they're
team.
still
They're
obviously
still
they're on playoff.
yeah,
I think what they have to start looking at is these guys on their bench, like guys like Jarris Walker. You have to find out his value now, and
right,
now because Pascal Siakam isn't going to be there forever, and he was
right.
the best player for Indiana this finals. It wasn't Tyrese Halliburton; it was
Yeah, it
Pascal
was Siakam.
Siakam. So you have to take a look. You drafted Jarris Walker with the hope in 2 or 3 years when Siakam was getting up there in age,
Now,
he could replace him, and this is your time now to experiment with that. So get rid of Ovi Toppin, don't re-sign him, and let Jarris Walker take his minutes.
I think the only concern they have is they got to figure out the future with Miles Turner, because he's the only one
He's
that
gone.
is on an expiring contract.
I think he's gone.
That would be the thing. Are they going to look at an upgraded center? Do they think to bring him back? I don't know what they do there. I think that's like the only question mark they have going into the offseason. Obviously, Halliburton's a big question mark because he's out for next year pretty much, and you're going to have to replace him at some capacity. But I don't know exactly who that's going to be. Like maybe they go with McConnell a lot more next season as a starter for now, even though he's probably better off the bench to begin with. It's really tough to decipher what they're going to try to do next season and try to at least keep this going. As we both mentioned, we expect them to make the playoffs next season, but it'd be really tough to duplicate this run to the finals without Halliburton
It's
playing.
not happening.
It just wouldn't.
It's absolutely not happening.
It would have to take another miracle, like what happened this postseason for them. And I'm not saying that the run. It was just the run, which is insane this season, just because of how many insane comebacks they had.
I don't want to call it a fluke run because I don't think flukes really exist at this high of a
isn't
skill
the word
level.
for it. It's weird.
It's
to
highly
say
improbable.
What it was.
It's highly improbable. It was a highly improbable run with a bunch of gritty underdogs that made the right shots at the right time and got. There is luck in basketball, and all the luck was on their side this postseason. That's what happened. It's obviously they're all highly skilled individual, but they got the lucky bounces. They got hot when they needed to, and it's not happening again, especially with a lesser roster.
So yeah, we'll have to see what they do to get free agency. And for the Thunder, I mean, we already talked about it. They're pretty much locked right now in terms of being the favorite next season, and they're going to be returning a lot of players too, which is a really big factor for them going in to next season as well.
Yeah, I guess we could talk about the future, of next season. You kind of mentioned those odds. Do you have any early season favorites for next year?
OKC's got to be the favorite in the Western Conference. I don't think there's any really.
Yeah, I'm not gonna discredit any odds makers or anything like that. But I'm talking your personal favorites.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with OKC in the West. I think the closest team to me that I think would compete with them is Houston, and I guess it's easier to be said than done. But when you are the number 2 seed in the Western Conference this past season, now you just got Kevin Durant while maintaining some of your key players. Like they didn't have to get traded to Jabari Smith, they didn't have to trade Tari Eason, they only had to trade Jalen Green. I know getting rid of Dillon Brooks might hurt defensively, but you still were able to make that deal without giving up a lot of assets, and you only gave up 1 first-round pick and a bunch of seconds. I think it would be tough not to say Houston's got to be right there in terms of being the second best team in the Western Conference outside of OKC. I'll go with the Thunder as my favorite to win the West and probably have a good chance to go repeat. The Eastern Conference is where it gets tricky because I feel like it's anyone's ball game now at this point. Boston, Indiana, though, they're in a bad spot because they've lost their 2 top star players to both Achilles injuries. So now they're out for a majority of next season. And the rest of the teams, you have Orlando just added Desmond Bane. The Knicks still are in search of their head coach. We're still looking to see who that's going to be. And they might still make additions in the offseason. The Cavaliers had a very good year this past year, but after a disappointing matchup with Indiana, do they stick with some of their core players? Do they move on to maybe making a trade? And you look at the rest of the conference, it's like, where do you go from there? Like maybe Philadelphia gets back to normal this season if Embiid is to stay healthy. There's just
He's
the
old.
East is the East is just very wide open. Like you
He's
can
a,
make the case for a bunch of teams saying, yeah, I could see why they're going to the NBA Finals this year as the Eastern Conference champions.
If a one team, I
Um,
will make the. I guess I'll go into my Western Conference. I guess do you want to pick your Eastern Conference or I pick my Western Conference, or do you want me to pick
I made my
my
Western
Western
Conference
Conference?
pick, so if you want to make your Western Conference pick, you
Yeah,
can.
for me it's Houston, and
Do you think it's Houston?
again I know it's the number two team out of the West right now, but I think they're way better than OKC right now. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander probably had the least inspiring Game 7 performance I've ever seen in my life. He had what 29 points on 25
20,
shots.
29, 12, one
I,
turnover, five
I
rebounds,
don't
I
care
think.
about the turnover
No, I
because
know, I know.
TJ McConnell was guarding him. That's never going to happen in an NBA Finals game again. He
He
went 7 of
shot,
25 from the
yeah.
field.
The craziest stat I heard it. I guess I should say it's funny, but when Halliburton got hurt, he had 3 3-pointers at that point in the game. That was the most 3-pointers anyone made in the entirety of the game. Was 3,
Yeah,
which is crazy to think, but that's just one of the wilder stats I've seen happen in an NBA Finals game, and let alone a Game 7 game.
yeah. That's why it was one of the most uninspiring Game 7 performances I've ever seen. So you could tell me that if Houston's best player is Kevin Durant versus Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, assuming Kevin Durant is of similar quality next year, and when you have guys like Sengun, which Sengun is miles ahead of Chet Holmgren.
Yeah,
So
and let's
in that front court battle, I'm taking Sengun over Holmgren and whatever power forward you want to put next to him.
and I think you and I both can agree on Holmgren, where he didn't really have the best finals. He did really step up though last night
He did.
because they needed him to step up.
Listen, Chet's a good
played,
player. He's
yeah,
a
if
young
he
player.
played anywhere close to what he played in Game 6, OKC could have lost that game. Him putting up 18 points with 8 rebounds, 5 blocks, like that's huge. Like he had to have that big of a game. Otherwise, OKC was going to be in a lot of trouble, and this could have came down to the final wire the last 2 minutes of the game. So it was big that he was stepped up. But yeah, no, I would take Sengun over him. We talked
The
about
only
Durant,
thing is,
and Durant's huge.
and yeah, I would, and they're gonna have a depth lineup where they're probably gonna have Amen Thompson play point guard because you know what. You really won't need a true point guard in that.
Keep in
I know
mind,
they have Fred VanVleet there. I'm not talking,
well,
but I'm saying to close games,
remember,
Fred VanVleet is not closing those games.
I don't know if you saw about Fred VanVleet. They declined his player option, or his option, so he is a free agent now.
Good. That is the right answer, and I didn't even know that. Because that depth lineup, they're gonna have Tari Eason, they're gonna have Thompson, they're gonna have Kevin Durant, they're gonna have Sengun. They're gonna have 5 guys out there that are 6'8" or taller. It's gonna be crazy, and you know what? They don't need that true point guard because Kevin Durant is a good enough ball handler and distributor. You have Sengun out there that's not as good, but for a big man, he's second to Jokic. And then if Thompson, who is another talented wing forward ball handler, you're going to have between those 3 guys. It wouldn't surprise me if they average 15 assists a game.
Right.
So do you really need a primary point guard on the field when your front court can average 15 assists a game? I really don't know.
Their bench is a very young bench, but it's good also. Like Steven Adams obviously not is on the younger side of things, but he was big for them in the postseason last year. I think the biggest thing for the Rockets is you're looking for guys like Reed Shepherd and Cam Whitmore, like some of those guys that were highly touted prospects in a sense. You want them to take that next step, hopefully.
I could see them shipping those guys off,
and they could be
for a point guard
too. Right, that could be also a thing. Like if there's a veteran point guard on the market, they absolutely could just ship one or maybe even both, depending on who's there. That's absolutely fair. I think the Rockets have to get a shot that they could be the team to beat in the West. I think it's the Thunder's to lose right now until further notice. I think you and I could probably agree on that.
Yeah, we can agree on that. We can agree on that.
Because if you look at the roster for the Thunder, they're not losing anyone. Like everyone's under contract or they're under a team option, so they're set for another couple seasons. It's right around 2026, 2027 is where they have to figure things out because they have Shea under on expiring deal. Hardenstein's got a team option. Dort's expiring deal. Chet Holmgren's gonna have to be paid at that point. Like that's really when things get where you have to think about that for OKC. For now, this next season at least will be they can at least enjoy it for now until they have to figure all those money issues from there. What about Eastern Conference? Are you the same way with me, where it's kind of like you know tough to pick? You just really trying to figure out
No,
who's
and
like the needle in the haystack.
so I'm gonna eliminate the Bucks. I'm gonna eliminate
The Bucks have to be eliminated. They're just
Bucks
not
are
good.
eliminated off the top of off the get go. Pacers are also eliminated off the get go. They're not winning the East unless there's major injuries to all these other teams. Again, they're assuming that there are no more major
Hey, you know
injuries
what?
going
I
on.
mean,
I
you
think
never
three
know.
Achilles tears in one postseason is enough for all of next year. When it
I
comes to
know,
major
but
stars,
I'm just saying the Pacers. You never know. I would say count them out, but after what I saw,
I'm counting them
even
out.
with
They're
even with
they're
Halliburton
done.
getting hurt, I'm not gonna
And you know what, Nick? All I'm
throw
gonna
them
say
off
is
yet.
if they do win 55 games next year and they do make the conference finals, then Hal Burton is the fakest superstar of all time. That's the only thing
And it just
you could
shows you how
possibly
good of a
come with that.
coach. It shows you how good of a
Yeah,
coach Carlisle is too.
yeah. That's the only. And I'm giving Tyrese Halliburton the benefit of the doubt that he is a true superstar in the league, and they're not going to recover. So that is my analysis.
So right now it
Boston,
sounds
out of
like
all these other teams, have a better
hmm,
chance, but they're not going to come out of the East.
well,
I think it's
Boston's
eight,
another weird spot too. But yeah, go ahead.
but they still have more talented players than
Right.
anyone
I mean,
else.
it
Peyton
was more
Pritchard's very talented. Derek White is there. Jalen
well,
Brown is
right.
there.
It's more of what's going to happen with those guys in the offseason because
Right, and this
you're
is why it's way too early.
right. You don't know what's going to happen yet. But go ahead.
Uh, Philadelphia, Joel Embiid is way too old. I don't think they're going to re-sign Quentin Grimes. Yeah, you have Jared McCain
And we
and
don't know what they're doing
Tyrese
with pick number 3.
Maxey.
No
Yeah, I
idea.
mean they probably takes they should take someone like Ace Bailey because Paul George that's an albatross of a contract. But I don't
Which, by
think
the way, if you want to find out who we think they'll take in the upcoming draft, make sure to tune into tomorrow's episode of the All Gas No Break Sports Show. We'll be doing our annual NBA mock draft, our third annual mock draft, and we'll get to find out who we took for the Sixers at pick number 3, as well as the remaining 30 selections in the first round of the NBA draft. But continue your point.
Embiid is way too old to still be a dominant superstar, and he has more games missed than games played at this point of his career. So
Which is
I
wild.
I think it's fair to say that Philadelphia's window is shut. The Knicks, depending on who their head coach is, and obviously any roster changes, are favorites to come out of East, but they're not my pick. I think it's Cleveland.
Okay.
I think it's Cleveland. I think they're going to have one more year to gel in the system with Kenny Atkinson, and I think it makes the most sense that they would advance next year after winning, the most games in the East this past year. 60 plus games. Now, and you don't have Boston there, you don't have an Indiana, you have a New York team which you match up well against. So that's should be your main threat, and that's who I could see coming out of East. I think it's gonna be Rockets, Cavs, and Adam Silver isn't as mad because at least Cleveland is a mid-sized market, and Houston is I want to say the largest of the smallest of the large markets. So for ratings perspectives, it should be good and celebrated by the NBA. But that's my early finals matchup for both East and West.
I want to pick the Knicks, but the head coaching search is where I'm in the same boat where
I
I
think
don't
it's
know.
if it's Taylor Jenkins or I think that they're in good they're in good shape. But
Yeah, I can't support it if it's Mike. Like I'll support the team, but Mike Brown is where I'm getting very worried about because I don't want. I just don't.
I think it's a smoke screen. Personally, I don't think
It
they're
might
actually
be.
going to hire Mike Brown because their last three coaching searches they all brought in Mike Brown. He was a finalist, and
Yeah,
that's how it was. To me,
yeah.
if they didn't pick him the last two times, they're not going to pick him this time.
But outside of the coaching search, when you brought up with the free agency stuff as well, and what they need to do, like they still need to add a piece or two for their bench to be better than what they were this past season because you can't rely on your star players to just. You need a well-rounded team if you're going to be able to win a championship. Because, like, obviously having your star player is great and everything, and having him go off, but you need a lot more depth on the team, and I think that's where you have to figure out if you're in New York, where are you going to go in the offseason exactly, what exactly, and who exactly are you looking at towards trying to make that big move? We've heard the smokescreen with Giannis. I don't know exactly what's happening there. Durant was initially a rumor. Then they said no, we're good, so that they get traded to Houston. They're It's going to be interesting to see because they've said that maybe they want to make some moves in the offseason to try to get back to the conference finals at least, and even go further than that. I think they have the roster absolutely to do it, and especially with the injuries now to Indiana and Boston, their chances become significantly increased, which is why them and Cleveland are the top two favorites in the Eastern Conference. So I think it goes either way. I I'm going to go with Cleveland as well. I need to see what the Knicks could do first before I could confidently say that yes, they could go back to the NBA. They could go to the NBA Finals this time around. I just don't know exactly. I need to see what they do at head coach, and then I need to see what they're going to do afterwards. If they want to run back the same roster, I'm not opposed to it, but I would like to see maybe one or two additions to the offseason at least before I could say, okay, this team can make the NBA Finals this season. I don't know if they can win it, but I could see them making the finals.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what the Knicks do this offseason. It's there's a lot of options here.
Yeah.
Jaren Jackson Jr. is rumored to maybe be one of those guys, and the Karl Anthony Towns, Jaren Jackson Jr. front court makes a lot of sense when you realize that Cat's biggest weakness is defense, and Jaren Jackson's biggest weakness is rebounding, which they both complement each other. But when you realize that they both average like 4 fouls a game, you could have your starting front court sitting out the entire third and fourth quarter. That's not really great. So
Right.
that's something that would have to be addressed if that is the route they're going to go.
So in your finals, who do you have winning?
Oh, the Rockets. I think the Rockets.
Rockets?
I think right now the Rockets on paper are the best team, and Van Vliet is addition by subtraction. Getting rid of him.
I have OKC winning and repeating as champion. I think until
So it's the first repeat in 8 years.
Yeah.
That's what you have.
Yeah.
I'm going to go for the eighth unique champion in 8 years because that's more fun.
That would be more fun. I would rather have an eighth unique champion. Of course, for us, we would obviously love them to be the Knicks, but gotta wait and see. And you talk about the Rockets. We already talked about the Kevin Durant trade as well. If you want to hear more in-depth detail about that Kevin Durant trade, also tune in to tomorrow's episode and listen to us live react to that Kevin Durant trade as it went down. A lot to be talked about on that show tomorrow. Mock draft as well as the Kevin Durant trade. But Johnson, before we wrap up tonight's show, you have some news for us that's going to be happening a little bit later on in July.
Yeah, later on in July, we are going to be heading back to the Matty Stevens Sports Cards LLC card show in Staten Island. Shows every 4 to 6 weeks. And I mentioned the schedule before. Last time it was at St. Anne's Gym over on Cromwell Avenue. This time it's going to be at St. Joseph St. Thomas. That's July 12th, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. So it's going to be at St. Joseph St. Thomas. Again, it's Matty Stevens Sports Cards LLC. That is July 12th.
Yeah, it was a great show that we had a couple weeks ago, so looking forward to that one as well. And some other notes as well, Johnson, for us before we wrap up tonight. For us, in terms of scheduling, we'll be having another NBA episode soon, or probably the next couple of days, depending on. We have free agency coming up as well for the NBA. I know you are going on vacation soon, so we'll try to plan that one out and see if we can plan that one beforehand. Free agency is coming up for the NBA. We'll make some predictions on where key players will go. If we have time, we'll do a recap of that. If not, the next time we'll be talking live here on the broadcast will be for first round breakdown of the MLB season. The MLB first half of the season is coming down to an end. We'll recap the first half of the season and then give a preview of the second half of the season, as well as making our All-Star game selections, and we'll make some maybe some predictions on updated World Series picks. Who knows? We'll have to see where we go from there. But it's been a good couple weeks here on the show and not too far away from football season as well. So getting down to the good old summer. It's getting a little bit hotter here on the East Coast, but it's certainly getting hot in sports right now here in the professional world of sports. Johnson, any final words from you before we wrap up tonight's episode?
Take us home.
I will take us home. That's going to do it for this week's edition of the All Gas No Break Sports Show. The Oklahoma City Thunder are the NBA champions. I should also note the Florida Panthers won their second straight Stanley Cup, so also congratulations to them. We'll see if OKC can repeat like Florida did in the NHL. OKC will try to go back-to-back next season. But as I mentioned earlier on as well, tune in to tomorrow's episode of the All Gas No Break Sports Show. It is our third annual NBA mock draft, as well as us breaking down the Kevin Durant trade that just happened between them and between the Suns and the Rockets. That's all to come tomorrow on the All Gas No Break Sports Show. This has been Nicholas Pavona, joined alongside by my co-host Andrew Johnson for the All Gas No Break Sports Show. Have a great rest of your week.